Today we're breaking down every level of cars that changed history explained. From vehicles so bad they make you question basic engineering, to machines so perfect they redefine what excellence even means. This isn't hype. This is experience, history, and brutal honesty. Let's get into it. Level 1. Disaster Class. These are cars so fundamentally broken that owners genuinely considered walking an upgrade. The 1958 Ford Edsel. A car so spectacularly terrible that its name became synonymous with failure. Ford invested $400 million in this disaster. That's $4 billion in today's money. And what did they get? A car that leaked oil like it was part of the design. The transmission? It would slip randomly. Just driving down the highway, and suddenly you're in neutral. The push-button transmission controls and the steering wheel would stick, jam, or just refuse to work entirely. But here's the real problem. Nobody wanted to look at it. That front grille looked like a toilet seat. I'm not being mean, that's what people actually said in 1958. The styling was so polarizing that dealerships couldn't give these away. Ford projected 200,000 sales in the first year. They sold 63,000. By year 3, it was dead. This wasn't bad luck. This was bad engineering. This car gets a 0 out of 10. A perfect 0. Joining it in this tier are the 1976 Aston Martin Lagonda, the 1982 Cadillac HT4100, and the Yugo GV. The Lagonda had electronics that failed if you looked at them wrong. The Cadillac's engine would grenade itself before 50,000 miles. The Yugo was built so cheaply that car doors would literally fall off on the highway. I'm giving them 0.5 to 1 out of 10. Certified disasters. These cars didn't just fail to change history. They became cautionary tales. They're remembered specifically so we never repeat these mistakes. Level 2, barely functional, F+. Unlike Level 1 disasters, these cars technically worked. If the conditions were perfect, the maintenance was obsessive, and you prayed before every drive. The 1975 British Leyland cars. Let me tell you about British Leyland in the late 70s. The Austin Allegro, the Morris Marina, the Triumph TR7. These cars could run. They could transport you from point A to point B. But here's the catch. They required constant, almost religious maintenance. Take the Austin Allegro. The engine was fine. The design was questionable, but functional. But the build quality? Nightmarish. Electrical systems would short out randomly. Window regulators would break every few months. The square steering wheel, yes, square, would crack and split. Door handles would snap off in your hand. And the rust. Oh, the rust. These cars would start rusting on the showroom floor. Owners in the UK would buy one new, and within 2 years, there'd be rust bubbles forming around the wheel arches. But here's what makes this Level 2 instead of Level 1. If you maintained it obsessively, it would keep running. There were Allegros that made it to 100,000 miles. But their owners had to replace half the car to get there. These cars don't just fail. They fail in one specific, infuriating way. This earns a 2 to 4 out of 10. The Fiat 124 gets a 2. Charming when it worked, which was Tuesdays. The Renault Dauphine gets a 3.5. Light, economical, and made of the thinnest steel known to mankind. On paper, interesting. In reality, painful. These cars changed history by showing manufacturers what happens when you cut corners. British Leyland collapsed. Fiat had to completely reinvent their quality control. These failures forced an entire industry to get serious about reliability. Level 3, mediocre. We've finally reached cars that actually work consistently. But don't get excited. The 1980s Chevrolet Celebrity. Peak 1980s General Motors mediocrity. These are the participation trophies of the car world. The Celebrity was GM's best-selling car for multiple years in the 80s. Why? Because it was reliable enough, cheap enough, and boring enough that fleet buyers ordered them by the thousands. It had 4 wheels. It had an engine that started. It had seats. Congratulations, it's a car. The interior was plastic. Not nice plastic. The kind of plastic that felt like it came from the same factory that made storage bins. The cloth seats would stain if you looked at them. The dashboard would crack in sunlight. Performance? There was none. The base engine made 92 horsepower. 92. That's less than a modern Honda Civic. It took almost 15 seconds to hit 60 miles per hour. Passing someone on the highway required planning, patience, and prayer. But here's the thing, it'll get you there. Nobody complains. Nobody cares. This sits between 5 and 7 out of 10. The Dodge Aries K-Car gets a 5.5. Saved Chrysler from bankruptcy by being aggressively adequate. The Toyota Tercel gets a 6.5. Reliable, efficient, and utterly forgettable. The Ford Tempo gets a 5. It existed. That's the nicest thing I can say. These cars changed history not through innovation, but through volume. They proved that good enough could sell millions. They showed that most buyers didn't want excitement, they wanted transportation. This mediocrity funded the development of better cars that came later. Level 4, decent. This is where cars stop being gambles and start being tools. 1989 to 1998 Nissan 240SX. The Nissan 240SX. A car that did exactly what it promised, every single time. It wasn't trying to be a supercar. It wasn't trying to revolutionize design. It was a rear-wheel drive sports coupe with a smooth 4-cylinder engine, balanced handling, and bulletproof reliability. The SR20 engine in Japan, or the KA24 in America, both would run forever. 200,000 miles? Easy. 300,000? I've seen it. The handling was neutral, predictable, and confidence-inspiring. You could push this car at 8/10 on a back road, and it would reward you with feedback and grip. Push it to 10/10, and it would slide progressively, controllably. Young drivers bought these and learned how to actually drive. Enthusiasts bought these and modified them into serious track weapons. Drifters bought these and invented an entire motorsport culture around them. You didn't worry about it. You just drove it. This earns a 7.5 to 8.5 out of 10. The Honda Accord, 1990 to 1993, gets an 8. The benchmark for reliability that every competitor measured themselves against. The Mazda 323/Protégé gets a 7.5. Simple, durable, and cheap to maintain. The Volvo 240 gets an 8.5. Would outlast the heat death of the universe. These cars changed history by proving that reliability and driving enjoyment didn't have to be mutually exclusive. They built brand loyalty that lasts to this day. They created enthusiast communities that are still thriving 30 years later. Level 5, excellent. Level 5 is where cars stop being good and start becoming standards. The 1984 Dodge Caravan/Plymouth Voyager. The first minivan. The vehicle that created an entire segment that didn't exist before. Before 1984, if you had kids and needed space, you bought a station wagon or a full-size van. Station wagons were long, had terrible rear visibility, and handled like boats. Full-size vans were commercial vehicles that rode like trucks. Then Chrysler invented the minivan. Front-wheel drive, car-like handling, sliding doors, removable seats, a low floor that made it easy for kids and elderly passengers to get in and out. The Caravan could seat 7 people comfortably, carry all their luggage, get decent fuel economy, and park in a normal garage. Within 2 years, every manufacturer had to respond. Toyota made the Previa, Ford made the Aerostar, GM made the Astro and the Lumina APV. The Caravan outsold all of them for almost 20 years. This is the car everyone else tried to beat. This gets a 9 to 9.5 out of 10. The 1986 Acura Legend gets a 9. Proved Japanese luxury could compete with Germany. The 1992 Ford Explorer gets a 9. Created the modern SUV segment and dominated it for a decade. The 1997 Toyota Prius gets a 9.5. The first mass-market hybrid. Changed the conversation about fuel economy forever. These cars changed history by creating entirely new markets. They forced competitors to follow or die. They set new standards that defined entire decades of automotive design. Level 6, best. When one of these shows up, everything else has to adapt. The 1964 to 1973 Ford Mustang. The original Ford Mustang. When this car launched in April 1964, it sold 22,000 units on the first day. Within the first year, Ford sold over 400,000 Mustangs. That's more than one every minute of every day for 12 months straight. This wasn't just a car. This was a cultural phenomenon. The Mustang took existing Ford Falcon parts, packaged them in a long hood, short deck design, offered dozens of customization options, and sold it at a price that young buyers could actually afford. You could buy a base Mustang with a straight six engine and few options for $2,400. Or you could spec it with a V8, performance suspension, and racing stripes and have a legitimate sports car. The sound. That V8 rumble became the soundtrack of American car culture. The design. Aggressive, muscular, instantly recognizable from a mile away. The emotion. You don't just drive this car. You experience it. Within 2 years, Chevrolet responded with the Camaro. Pontiac made the Firebird. Dodge made the Challenger. AMC made the Javelin. The pony car segment was born entirely because of this one vehicle. This is a 10 out of 10. The 1961 Jaguar E-Type gets a 10. Enzo Ferrari called it the most beautiful car ever made. The 1959 Mini Cooper gets a 10. Proved that small cars could be fun, practical, and revolutionary. The 1963 Porsche 911 gets a 10. Still in production 60 years later for a reason. These cars changed history by capturing the imagination of entire generations. They didn't just sell well, they became icons. They appeared in movies, music, and art. They defined what people dreamed about when they thought about cars. Level 7, God tier. These cars transcend generations. The Ford Model T, 1908 to 1927. Before this car, automobiles were luxury items for wealthy people. Custom-built, hand-assembled, expensive. Henry Ford had a different vision. He wanted to build a car that farmers, teachers, and factory workers could afford. In 1908, the Model T cost $850. That was expensive, but achievable for middle-class families. By 1925, through revolutionary assembly line manufacturing, Ford had dropped the price to $260. That's cheaper than a horse and buggy. Ford didn't just make cars affordable. He transformed them from luxury goods into tools that regular people used every day. The Model T was simple. So simple that owners could repair it themselves with basic tools. The engine was reliable. The suspension was high enough to handle terrible roads. The design was practical. Ford sold over 15 million Model Ts. For context, that was half of all cars on Earth in 1920. This car created suburbs. Before the Model T, people lived within walking distance of work. After the Model T, they could live 10 miles away and commute. It created road trips. Before the Model T, long-distance travel meant trains. After the Model T, families could drive across the country. It created the American automotive industry. Before the Model T, cars were niche products. After the Model T, they were essential. Other manufacturers tried to compete. They failed. The Model T was too cheap, too reliable, too practical. It took nearly 20 years for anyone to build something better. This isn't just a car. It's an institution. I'm giving this an 11 out of 10. The 1922 Austin 7 gets an 11. Did for Europe what the Model T did for America. The 1938 Volkswagen Beetle gets an 11. Sold over 21 million units across 65 years. The most produced car design in history. The 1966 Toyota Corolla gets an 11. Over 50 million sold. Still in production. The best-selling car nameplate of all time. These cars didn't just change history. They created it. They made personal transportation accessible to billions of people. They reshaped cities, economies, and entire ways of life. Decades later, they're still studied, still respected, still remembered. They set standards that manufacturers still chase today. That's every level of cars that changed history explained. Which level are you choosing? And what should we break down next?